Adrian had always wished for a simple life. Unfortunately, his ability to see and communicate with ghosts made such a life impossible. From childhood, he'd been burdened by their endless pleas, their desperate cries for help, and their unrelenting presence in his life. To him, it wasn't a gift. It was a curse that complicated every waking moment. But nothing could have prepared Adrian for the ghost of Era. It started like an ordinary day. Adrian was tending to his small vegetable stall at the local market, wiping sweat off his brow and bargaining with customers when he noticed her. At first glance, she seemed like any other young woman, dressed in a flowing white dress, her long hair framing her delicate face. But there was something ethereal about her presence, a shimmer to her outline that made her stand out in the bustling market. Adrian's stomach dropped. She wasn't a customer. "I need your help," Era said softly, her voice laced with urgency. Adrian sighed. "Let me guess. You're a ghost." She nodded, her expression earnest. "I'll pay you 100,000 Cuban pesos if you help me." Adrian frowned. "Pay me? You're dead. Where are you going to get that kind of money?" Era smiled faintly. "Before I died, I made arrangements. My savings, my valuables, they're still intact. I need you to help my boyfriend, William, move on. He's drowning in guilt, and I can't leave until I know he's okay." Adrian hesitated. The amount of money she was offering was life-changing, but the task she was proposing was overwhelming. He had no idea how to help a grieving man move on, especially one he'd never met. Still, he found himself nodding. "Fine, I'll help," he said, more out of curiosity than confidence. "But don't get your hopes up. He might not listen to me." Adrian's first task was to deliver William's favorite dish, fresh lumpia, to his house. Era insisted it was a way to ease the tension. Armed with the dish and a mix of nervousness and determination, Adrian made his way to William's home. The house was a large, modern structure with towering gates and a well-kept garden. Despite its grandeur, there was an air of melancholy about it. Curtains drawn, the yard eerily silent. When William opened the door, Adrian was momentarily taken aback. The man standing before him was strikingly handsome, with chiseled features and piercing eyes. But those eyes told a story of sleepless nights and overwhelming sorrow. "What do you want?" William's voice was curt, his demeanor cold. Adrian cleared his throat, holding out the container. "I brought fresh lumpia. It's from Era." William's expression darkened at the mention of her name. Without a word, he snatched the container, shoved a wad of cash into Adrian's hand, and slammed the door shut. Adrian stared at the closed door in disbelief. "Well, that went great," he muttered. Before he could leave, 3 figures materialized behind him. Grotesque, sneering demons who had tormented him for years. Well, Adrian," one of them drawled, its voice dripping with mockery. "Did you think Prince Charming would welcome you with open arms? Maybe you should have poisoned the lumpia," another sneered. "That way, he and his ghostly girlfriend could reunite in the afterlife." The third demon cackled. "Don't forget to collect your payment first." Adrian glared at them. "Do you 3 ever get tired of being annoying?" The demons laughed but eventually disappeared, leaving Adrian to process the disastrous first encounter. Determined not to give up, Adrian returned to William's mansion a week later. This time, he noticed a "He Wanted" housekeeper sign posted on the gate. Seeing an opportunity to get closer to William, Adrian decided to apply for the position. Manong, the elderly housekeeper, greeted him at the door. She recognized Adrian from his previous visit and was delighted by his offer to help. "It's good you're here," she said, handing him an apron. "William needs someone to look after him. He's been difficult since the accident." Adrian settled into his new role quickly, keeping to himself as much as possible. But his solitude didn't last long. His ghostly friend Carla appeared one evening as he cleaned the kitchen. "Wow, Adrian," Carla said, her translucent form leaning against the counter. "William's house is amazing. Maybe you should marry him." Adrian rolled his eyes. "Carla, focus. You're supposed to keep the demons away, not crack jokes. Carla smirked. Fine, fine. But I did find something interesting about William's accident. Adrian paused, intrigued. What is it? Carla's expression grew serious. That guy Diego, the one who's always been jealous of William, he tampered with William's motorcycle. It wasn't an accident, it was sabotage. Adrian's stomach turned. How do you know this? I overheard him talking to his friend. He admitted it, Carla said. Before Adrian could process the revelation, William walked into the kitchen. The young man froze in the doorway, his eyes narrowing as he watched Adrian seemingly talking to himself. Who are you talking to? William asked, suspicion evident in his tone. Adrian stammered. Just thinking out loud. William didn't look convinced but didn't press further. He grabbed a glass of water and left, leaving Adrian with a sinking feeling. The revelation about Diego weighed heavily on Adrian. He knew he had to confront the truth, but how could he convince William without revealing his ability to see ghosts? And how could he ensure that justice was served for Era? As the days passed, Adrian grew more determined. Era's presence was a constant reminder of his promise, and Carla's unwavering support gave him the courage to push forward. But as the tangled web of secrets and emotions unraveled, Adrian realized that helping William move on wouldn't just free Era. It might also bring him closer to a purpose he never thought he'd find. Adrian found himself increasingly entangled in the life of William. Despite the man's brooding nature and closed-off demeanor, Adrian couldn't help but feel drawn to him, not because of Era's pleas, but because he sensed something deeper beneath the layers of grief and anger. One evening, while scrubbing the marble floors of William's kitchen, Carla appeared out of nowhere, startling him. Adrian, I've got something big, she said, her voice filled with urgency. Adrian sighed, setting down the mop. What is it this time? Another revelation about Diego? No, this is about Era, Carla said, her tone serious. The night of the accident, Era wasn't just out on a casual ride with William. She was planning to confront him about something. Adrian raised an eyebrow. Confront him? About what? Carla hesitated, her ghostly figure flickering. She suspected that William was having second thoughts about their engagement. She thought he might have been seeing someone else. Adrian frowned. That doesn't make sense. Era told me she wanted to help William move on because he was stuck in his grief. Why wouldn't she mention something like this? Maybe she didn't want you to think badly of him, Carla suggested. Or maybe she's still processing her own feelings. Ghosts hold on to what's unresolved, remember? Adrian sat down at the kitchen table, his mind racing. So, you're saying that their relationship wasn't as perfect as it seemed? Carla nodded. Exactly. And I think William's guilt isn't just about the accident. It's about what happened between them before it. Adrian's thoughts were interrupted when William entered the kitchen. He froze when he saw Adrian sitting at the table, seemingly talking to himself. You're doing it again, William said, his voice tinged with irritation. Talking to yourself. Adrian scrambled to his feet, grabbing his mop, just thinking out loud. Sorry. William eyed him suspiciously but said nothing, walking past him to pour a glass of whiskey. As he sipped it, his gaze lingered on Adrian, as if trying to decipher his peculiar behavior. Adrian couldn't shake the feeling that Diego's involvement in the accident was more sinister than Carla had initially revealed. Determined to uncover the truth, he decided to do some investigating of his own. Late one night, Adrian sneaked into William's study. The room was dimly lit, the air heavy with the scent of aged leather and mahogany. Era's photograph sat prominently on the desk, her radiant smile a stark contrast to the somber atmosphere. Adrian began rifling through drawers, hoping to find anything that might shed light on Diego's role in the accident. As he searched, Carla appeared beside him. You're really going for the whole detective thing, huh? She teased. Carla, not now, Adrian muttered, sifting through stacks of papers. Fine, but hurry up. William's a light sleeper, Carla warned. Finally, Adrian found a file labeled Incident Report. Inside were photographs and police notes from the night of the crash. One detail caught his eye, a report of tampered brakes. "That bastard," Adrian whispered, his anger boiling. "What is it?" Carla asked, leaning over to see the document. Adrian held it up. The brakes on William's motorcycle were deliberately cut. This wasn't an accident, it was sabotage. Carla's expression darkened. "We need to tell William." Before Adrian could respond, the study door creaked open, and there stood William, his silhouette framed by the dim hallway light. His piercing gaze fell on Adrian, who was clutching the incriminating document. "What are you doing?" William's voice was low and sharp, cutting through the tense silence. Adrian froze, the file still in his hands. I was cleaning and, saw this lying out. I didn't mean to pry." William stormed forward, snatching the file from Adrian's grasp. His eyes scanned the page, and his expression shifted from anger to confusion, then to a simmering rage. "Where did you find this?" William demanded, his voice trembling. "In your drawer," Adrian admitted reluctantly. "But William, you need to see this for what it is. This wasn't just a tragic accident. Someone tampered with your brakes." William clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. "Diego," he muttered under his breath, the name laced with venom. Adrian stepped closer, his voice calm but firm. Carla overheard Diego admitting it. "He was jealous of you, of your wins in the races. He thought ruining your bike would knock you down a peg, but he didn't care that it could cost lives." William's eyes flickered with a mix of pain and fury. "That bastard. He killed her." The following day, William wasted no time. He reached out to a private investigator, providing the evidence Adrian had found and instructing them to dig deeper into Diego's involvement. Meanwhile, Adrian couldn't shake the heavy weight of Era's lingering presence. She appeared to him more frequently now, her once playful demeanor replaced by a solemn air. "You did the right thing," Era told him one afternoon, her translucent form hovering by the window. Adrian looked at her, his heart aching. "Did I, though? William's already been through so much. This might destroy him." Era smiled faintly. "Sometimes the truth is painful, but it's necessary. He needs to face it so he can finally heal, and so I can move on." Later that evening, William called Adrian into the living room. His face was pale, his eyes hollow. "It's confirmed," William said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Diego sabotaged the bike. He admitted it to the investigator. He's being arrested tomorrow." Adrian sat beside him, unsure of what to say. "I spent so long blaming myself," William continued, his voice cracking. "I thought if I had just been more careful, if I hadn't been so reckless, Era would still be here. But it wasn't my fault, it was his." Adrian placed a hand on William's shoulder. "You've carried this guilt for too long. Let it go, William. Era wouldn't want you to live like this." William looked at him, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Thank you, Adrian, for everything." As the night wore on, the house grew quiet. Adrian retreated to his room, but his mind was restless. Carla appeared, sitting on the edge of his bed. "You know, you're getting pretty good at this whole helping people thing," she said with a grin. Adrian chuckled weakly. "It's exhausting, though." Carla's smile softened. Era's almost ready to move on. She's at peace knowing the truth is out. But what about you? What's next for Adrian? Adrian sighed, staring at the ceiling. "I don't know. Maybe it's time I figured that out." In the quiet darkness, Adrian felt a strange sense of hope. For the first time in a long time, he believed that things might actually get better, for William, for Era, and maybe even for himself. The air in William's house had shifted. It no longer carried the weight of unspoken truths, but instead bristled with anticipation. The revelation of Diego's betrayal had unraveled years of guilt and self-blame for William, but the scars were far from healed. Adrian observed the changes in William closely. The once stoic and distant man now carried a vulnerability he hadn't seen before. William was often lost in thought, staring out the window or fiddling with Era's old belongings, as if trying to piece together fragments of his past life. One evening, Adrian brought him dinner. "You've barely eaten all day," he said, placing the tray on the table beside William. William sighed, rubbing his temples. "I can't stop thinking about everything. Diego's betrayal, Era, it's overwhelming." Adrian hesitated before sitting beside him. "It's okay to feel this way, William. You've been holding this inside for so long. Let yourself process it." William nodded, his gaze distant. "Era always said I was stubborn, you know? She'd call me out on it every chance she got. She was the only one who ever really understood me." Adrian smiled faintly. "She still does. She's been watching over you all this time, hoping you'd find peace." William turned to him, his brow furrowed. "You really believe that, don't you? That she's still here?" Before Adrian could respond, Carla appeared behind William, her ghostly figure leaning against the wall with an amused expression. "Oh, he believes it all right," she teased, her voice light. Adrian shot her a look, silently willing her to stay quiet. William noticed the flicker of emotion on Adrian's face. "What is it? Did you see something?" Adrian hesitated, but decided to tell the truth. "It's Carla. She's here right now." William's eyes widened, but he didn't look frightened. What is she doing?" Carla smirked and folded her arms. "Tell him I'm making sure he doesn't mess up his life again." Adrian relayed her message with a slight smile. To his surprise, William chuckled. "Sounds like something Era would say. Maybe you're not lying after all." The next few days were a whirlwind. Diego's arrest made headlines, and William was inundated with reporters and questions. Despite the chaos, Adrian stayed by his side, providing quiet support. One afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows across the living room, Adrian found William staring at a photograph of Era. "I've been thinking," William said, breaking the silence. "Era deserved more than this. More than the life I gave her, the ending she got." Adrian sat down across from him. "She didn't blame you, William. She loved you. And love isn't about perfect endings. It's about the moments you shared." William looked up, his eyes glassy. "Do you think she's happy now?" Before Adrian could answer, Era appeared beside him, her translucent figure glowing softly. "Tell him I'm at peace," she said, her voice warm. Adrian relayed her words, watching as William's expression softened. "I hope that's true," William murmured. "I hope she's finally free." Era smiled and reached out, her hand passing through William's shoulder. "Tell him to live his life, Adrian. He needs to move forward." William took Era's message to heart. He began to rebuild his life, starting with small steps, clearing out Era's belongings, renovating his home, and even returning to work at the family business. Adrian, meanwhile, found himself at a crossroads. His deal with Era was complete, yet he remained in William's orbit. Carla teased him mercilessly about his newfound attachment. "You're falling for him, aren't you?" Carla said one day, floating beside him as he cleaned the kitchen. Adrian nearly dropped the plate he was holding. "What? Don't be ridiculous." Carla raised an eyebrow. "Oh, come on. You've been bending over backward for this guy. Admit it. You care about him." Adrian didn't respond, but his flushed cheek spoke volumes. That evening, as Adrian prepared to leave for the day, William stopped him at the door. "Adrian," William said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant, "I just wanted to say thank you for everything. I don't know where I'd be without you." Adrian smiled, his heart fluttering. "You don't need to thank me, William. I'm just glad I could help." As he stepped outside, the cool night air greeted him, and he felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time in a long time, Adrian felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. From the shadows, Carla watched him with a knowing smile. "You're not fooling anyone, Adrian," she whispered. "Not even yourself." Adrian couldn't shake the memory of William's gratitude. It was an innocent moment, but it clung to him, growing in significance with each passing day. Carla, ever the meddlesome ghost, seemed to take pleasure in reminding him of his growing feelings for the man he'd sworn only to help. "Adrian, you've been smiling to yourself all day," Carla teased as she lounged on the sofa. "Let me guess, thinking about William again?" Adrian groaned and rubbed his temples. "Can you stop? I'm trying to focus." "Focus on what?" "The fact that you're falling for a guy who still stares at his dead fiancé's picture every night?" Carla quipped, her grin mischievous. Adrian frowned. "He's grieving. That's normal. And besides, I'm not falling for him." Carla raised a translucent eyebrow. "Right, and I'm not a ghost." Ignoring her, Adrian busied himself with organizing the kitchen cabinets in William's home. It had become a habit of his to keep himself occupied when his thoughts threatened to overwhelm him. Meanwhile, William had taken a significant step forward. For the first time since Era's death, he left the house for something other than work or errands. He visited a park she used to love, carrying a small bouquet of white lilies, her favorite. As he stood near the pond where they once spent countless afternoons, he spoke aloud, his voice tinged with both sadness and hope. "I'm trying, Era. I really am. I don't know if I'll ever be the same, but I want to honor you by living a life you'd be proud of." Unbeknownst to him, Adrian was nearby. Carla had insisted they follow William, claiming she had a hunch he'd need support. Adrian didn't want to intrude, so he stayed at a distance, watching as William placed the flowers by the water's edge. Carla floated beside him, her expression uncharacteristically soft. "He's letting go, Adrian. Slowly, but he's getting there." Adrian nodded, his chest tightening. He didn't know why, but seeing William like this, vulnerable yet strong, only deepened the complicated emotions swirling within him. The days passed, and Adrian noticed a change in William. He was more open, more willing to engage in conversations, and even started making plans for the future. One evening, as they sat in the living room, William surprised Adrian by asking, "Do you believe in fate?" Adrian blinked, caught off guard. I don't know. Why?" William leaned back, his gaze distant. "I've been thinking about everything that's happened. Meeting you, learning the truth about Diego, finding some closure with Era. It all feels too coincidental to be random." Adrian hesitated, unsure of how to respond. Before he could say anything, Carla appeared, her arms crossed. "Tell him it's not fate. It's me dragging you along to fix his life." Adrian bit back a laugh and shook his head. "Maybe it's not fate. Maybe it's just the right people showing up at the right time." William smiled faintly. "Maybe." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. It was a delivery, an envelope addressed to William. Inside was a letter from one of Era's old friends, thanking him for everything he'd done to bring Diego to justice. The letter ended with a poignant reminder. "Era would want you to find happiness, William. Don't let her memory hold you back. Let it inspire you to live fully." William read the letter aloud, his voice breaking near the end. Adrian watched him closely, his heart aching at the sight of the man's vulnerability. That night, Adrian found himself unable to sleep. He kept replaying the events of the day, from William's question about fate to the emotional letter. Carla appeared beside him, sitting cross-legged on the bed. "You're overthinking again," she said, her tone teasing but gentle. Adrian sighed. "I can't help it. I don't know what I'm doing anymore." Carla tilted her head. "You're doing what you've always done, helping people. You've just gotten a little more attached this time." Adrian frowned. "He deserves happiness, Carla. After everything he's been through, he deserves to heal and move forward." Carla smiled knowingly. "And maybe you're the one who can help him do that." The next morning, William approached Adrian with an unexpected request. "Would you go with me to visit Era's grave? I think it's time I said goodbye properly." Adrian agreed without hesitation, though his chest tightened at the thought. When they arrived at the cemetery, William stood silently by Era's headstone for a long time, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke, his voice steady but emotional. "Era, I'll always love you. You were my world, and losing you broke me in ways I didn't think I could recover from. But I know now that holding on to the pain isn't what you'd want for me. So, I'm letting you go. I'll carry your memory with me, but I'm going to try to live again." Adrian stood a few steps behind, giving him space. Carla appeared beside him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "He's really doing it, Adrian. He's letting go." As they left the cemetery, William turned to Adrian and said, "Thank you for coming with me. It means a lot." Adrian smiled, his heart feeling both heavy and light. "I'm glad I could be here." In that moment, something shifted between them. A silent understanding that they were no longer just two people brought together by circumstance. They were becoming something more, though neither was ready to name it just yet. The air in William's home felt lighter after their visit to Era's grave. It was as if the act of saying goodbye had released some of the grief that had long haunted the space. But while William began to move forward, Adrian found himself haunted by his own emotions, complex, layered, and increasingly difficult to ignore. Carla, as always, was quick to notice. "You're staring again," she teased, floating beside him as he washed the dishes one evening. Adrian sighed, scrubbing the plate in his hands with a bit too much vigor. "I'm not staring." You were practically burning holes into the back of his head while he read the newspaper. Adrian rolled his eyes. "I was just thinking." "About how handsome he looks when he's focused?" Carla smirked, spinning playfully in the air. Adrian shook his head, but the blush creeping up his neck betrayed him. "It doesn't matter. He's not ready for anything, and I'm not." He trailed off, unsure of what he was trying to say. Carla floated closer, her expression softening. "You're not what? Deserving? Worthy? Adrian, you've done so much for him already, and it's obvious he cares about you more than he's willing to admit. Maybe you're both just scared." Adrian didn't respond, but Carla's words lingered in his mind long after she disappeared for the night. The following weekend, William surprised Adrian with an invitation to a local fair. "I thought it might be nice to get out of the house," William explained, a hint of nervousness in his voice. Adrian hesitated, but ultimately agreed. The fair was bustling with life. Children laughing, vendors shouting, and the scent of roasted chestnuts filling the air. William seemed more relaxed than Adrian had ever seen him, his usual guarded demeanor giving way to genuine smiles. As they wandered through the fair, they came across a fortune-teller's tent. Carla, who had been quietly observing, immediately perked up. "Oh, this is going to be good. Let's go in." Adrian rolled his eyes. "It's just a gimmick." "Come on, Adrian. Where's your sense of adventure?" William said with a chuckle, already stepping inside. Reluctantly, Adrian followed. The fortune-teller, an older woman with piercing green eyes, smiled knowingly as they sat down. She didn't need much prompting to begin. "Two souls, connected by fate yet burdened by the past," she said, her gaze shifting between them. "One carries the weight of loss, the other the fear of rejection. But both are on the cusp of something transformative, if they're brave enough to embrace it." Adrian stiffened, his heart pounding. William looked equally unsettled, his brows furrowing in thought. "Life is fleeting," the woman continued. "Sometimes, the greatest risk is not taking one at all." The words hung heavy in the air as they left the tent, both men lost in their thoughts. Carla floated beside Adrian, her expression smug. "Well, that was cryptic and spot on. What do you think she meant?" Adrian glared at her. "I think she's just good at reading people." Carla snorted. "Sure, keep telling yourself that." The fair marked a turning point for William. He began opening up in ways Adrian hadn't anticipated. One evening, as they sat on the porch, William shared stories about his childhood, his dreams of becoming a writer, his love for motorcycle racing, and his regrets about not spending more time with Era before the accident. "You know," William said, his voice quiet. "I used to think that if I held onto the past tightly enough, it would somehow bring her back. But now I realize that holding on only kept me from living." Adrian listened intently, his chest tightening. "It's not easy to let go," he said softly, "but you're doing it, and that takes strength." William glanced at him, his expression unreadable. "I wouldn't have gotten this far without you, Adrian. You've been a lifeline." Adrian's breath caught. The vulnerability in William's voice was disarming, and for a moment, he didn't know how to respond. Before he could say anything, Carla appeared, hovering just out of William's line of sight. "Tell him how you feel," she mouthed, gesturing dramatically. Adrian shook his head subtly, his face heating up. Instead, he said, "I'm just glad I could help." The moment passed, but the air between them felt charged with unspoken emotions. That night, as Adrian lay in bed, Carla appeared beside him. "You're an idiot. You know that?" she said, crossing her arms. Adrian groaned. "What now?" "You had the perfect opportunity to tell him how you feel, and you chickened out." "I'm not going to complicate things," Adrian snapped. "He's still grieving, Carla. He doesn't need me adding to his confusion." Carla sighed, her expression softening. "You're not complicating things, Adrian. You're giving him something he hasn't had in a long time, a chance to love again. Don't underestimate what you mean to him." Adrian didn't respond, but as he drifted off to sleep, Carla's words echoed in his mind. Deep down, he knew she was right, but taking that leap felt like the scariest thing in the world. The bond between Adrian and William grew stronger in the days that followed. They spent more time together, often sharing quiet moments that spoke volumes. Adrian cooked meals, William helped with chores, and they even found themselves laughing over mundane things like burnt toast or spilled coffee. For the first time in a long while, William seemed lighter, as though a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. But peace was fleeting. One afternoon, Carla appeared with a warning. "You've got company," she said, her ghostly form flickering with agitation. Adrian frowned. "What do you mean?" "Diego," Carla spat, her tone dripping with disdain. "He's back, and he's heading straight for William." Adrian felt a chill run down his spine. Diego, the man responsible for William and Era's accident, had been a looming shadow in their lives. Despite his attempts to avoid confrontation, Adrian knew this meeting was inevitable. When Diego arrived, his presence was as disruptive as Adrian had feared. The man strode into the yard with a smug expression, his arrogance radiating like a toxic cloud. "William," Diego said, his voice falsely cheerful. "Long time no see." William's jaw tightened, his hands clenching into fists. "What are you doing here?" Diego smirked. "Relax, I'm not here to cause trouble. I just thought we should talk. Clear the air, you know?" Adrian stood to the side, watching the exchange with growing unease. Carla hovered nearby, her ghostly form pacing. "Don't trust him," she whispered to Adrian. "He's up to something." William's voice was cold. "There's nothing to talk about, Diego. You nearly killed me in Era. That's not something you can just clear the air about." Diego's smirk faltered, replaced by a flash of irritation. "Look, I made a mistake, okay? But it's not like I planned for things to go that far." Adrian couldn't stay silent any longer. "A mistake? Tampering with someone's motorcycle isn't a mistake. It's deliberate. You were jealous, and people got hurt because of you." Diego turned to Adrian, his eyes narrowing. "And who are you to lecture me? You're just the hired help." Adrian's temper flared, but William stepped between them. "That's enough, Diego. Leave." Diego glared at them both, but ultimately backed down. "Fine," he said, his tone laced with venom. "But don't think this is over." As he left, Carla let out a frustrated sigh. "That guy's a walking disaster. Keep an eye on him." Adrian nodded, his heart pounding. The encounter had left him shaken, but he was more determined than ever to protect William. That evening, William was unusually quiet. He sat on the porch, staring out at the stars, a glass of whiskey in his hand. Adrian joined him, unsure of what to say. "Diego's not going to let this go," William said finally, his voice heavy. "We'll deal with it," Adrian replied. "You're not alone in this." William turned to him, his eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and something else, something deeper. "You always say that. Why?" Adrian hesitated, his heart racing. "Because it's true. You've been through so much, and you deserve to have someone in your corner." William studied him for a moment before looking away. "I don't know if I deserve that. After everything, I feel like I've been stuck in this endless cycle of guilt and anger. And then you show up, and it's like, I can breathe again." Adrian's breath caught. "William." Before he could say more, William shook his head. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to dump all of this on you." Adrian placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to apologize. I'm here for you, no matter what." The sincerity in his voice seemed to break something in William. For the first time, he let his guard down completely, leaning into Adrian's touch. The next day, a storm rolled in, both literally and metaphorically. The sky was dark, rain pounding against the windows as William and Adrian found themselves confined to the house. The tension between them was palpable, unspoken feelings bubbling just beneath the surface. As they worked side by side to patch a leak in the roof, William suddenly stopped, his gaze fixed on Adrian. "Why do you stay?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the rain. Adrian looked at him, startled. "What do you mean?" "You could have left a long time ago, but you didn't. Why?" Adrian swallowed hard. "Because I care about you, more than I probably should." The confession hung in the air, heavy and charged. William's expression softened, his usual stoicism giving way to vulnerability. "I don't know if I'm ready," he admitted, "but I don't want to lose you." Adrian's heart ached at the honesty in William's words. "You're not going to lose me," he said firmly. "I'm not going anywhere." As the storm raged outside, the two men sat together in the dimly lit room, their unspoken emotions finally finding a voice. It wasn't a declaration of love, but it was a step, a small, significant step towards something neither of them fully understood yet. And in the shadows, Carla watched with a satisfied smile. "About time," she muttered to herself, disappearing into the ether to give them their privacy. The days following the storm were quiet but emotionally charged. William seemed more introspective, his usual defenses lowered. Adrian noticed the change but didn't push, allowing William to process his emotions in his own time. One evening, as Adrian prepared dinner, Carla materialized beside him, her ghostly form flickering in the dim kitchen light. "He's thinking about her again," Carla said, leaning against the counter. Adrian didn't need to ask who she meant. "It's natural," he replied, chopping vegetables with deliberate precision. Era was a big part of his life. Carla sighed, her tone a mix of frustration and empathy. "I know, but it's not just her memory that's haunting him. It's the guilt. He thinks he failed her." Adrian paused, the knife still in his hand. "How do you know?" "I was there when he broke down last night," Carla admitted. "He was staring at her picture, whispering apologies. He blames himself for the accident, for not protecting her. He can't move forward because he's stuck in the past." Adrian's chest tightened. He hated seeing William in pain, but he also knew that no amount of reassurance could erase the scars left by grief. "Do you think he'll ever let go?" Adrian asked quietly. Carla smiled faintly. "He might, if someone shows him that it's okay to live again." Later that night, Adrian found William on the porch, staring out into the darkness. The air was cool, the scent of rain lingering from an earlier shower. "Mind if I join you?" Adrian asked. William glanced at him, then nodded. "Sure." They sat in silence. For a while, the quiet hum of crickets filling the space between them. Finally, William spoke. "I used to sit out here with Era," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She loved the stars, said they made her feel small, but in a good way. Like all her problems didn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Adrian listened, his heart aching for the man beside him. I can't stop thinking about that night, William continued. If I hadn't agreed to the race, if I just stayed home, she'd still be here. It's not your fault, Adrian said gently. Diego's actions caused the accident, not yours. William shook his head. Maybe, but I still feel responsible. I should have protected her. You did the best you could, Adrian said firmly, and I think Era knows that. William looked at him, his eyes filled with a mix of pain and gratitude. Thank you, Adrian, for being here. Always, Adrian replied, his voice steady. The peace was shattered the next morning when Carla appeared in a panic. Adrian, William, Diego's back, and he's causing trouble. What kind of trouble? Adrian demanded, his heart racing. He's spreading rumors, saying William tampered with the race to cheat. He's trying to turn people against him. William's jaw tightened, his hands clenching into fists. I've had enough of him. Adrian placed a hand on his shoulder. We'll deal with this together. They found Diego at a local bar, surrounded by a small group of men who were laughing at his exaggerated stories. When William and Adrian walked in, the laughter died instantly. Well, Diego drawled, leaning back in his chair. If it isn't the man of the hour. Cut the crap, Diego, William said coldly. Why are you doing this? Diego smirked. Because it's fun, and because you deserve it. For what? William demanded. For being better than you? Diego's smirk faltered, replaced by a flash of anger. You think you're so perfect, don't you? Always winning, always getting the girl. Well, not anymore. Adrian stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. You're pathetic, Diego. Blaming others for your failures won't change anything. It only makes you look weak. Diego stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You've got a big mouth for a nobody. And you've got a lot to answer for, Adrian shot back. But we're not here to fight. We're here to tell you to back off. Leave William alone. Diego laughed, the sound bitter. Or what? Or we'll make sure everyone knows the truth about what you did that night, Adrian said, his tone deadly serious. Diego's face paled, and for a moment, he looked genuinely afraid. Then he scoffed and turned away. Whatever. You're not worth my time. As Diego stormed out of the bar, William exhaled slowly, his tension easing slightly. Thank you, he said quietly to Adrian. Adrian smiled. Always. With Diego out of the picture, life slowly began to return to normal. William focused on rebuilding his life. And Adrian was by his side every step of the way. One afternoon, as they worked together in the garden, William paused and looked at Adrian. You've changed things for me, he said suddenly. Adrian blinked, surprised. What do you mean? You've given me hope, William said, his voice earnest. For the first time since Era, I feel like maybe I can be happy again. Adrian felt his heart swell. You deserve to be happy, William, and I'll do whatever it takes to help you get there. William smiled, a rare, genuine smile that lit up his face. Thank you, Adrian, for everything. As they continued their work, Carla watched from a distance, her ghostly form glowing softly. You're doing great, Adrian, she whispered to herself. Keep it up. For the first time in a long while, the future felt bright. And as the sun set over the horizon, Adrian and William stood side by side, ready to face whatever came next. Weeks passed after Diego's confrontation, and life began to settle into a new routine for William and Adrian. The house was calmer, the presence of Carla less haunting, and William finally started to feel more at peace. However, there was still a lingering sense of emptiness, an ache for what once was, for what could have been. One evening, after finishing a quiet dinner together, Adrian found William sitting by the window, staring out at the garden. The sky was painted in hues of orange and purple as the sun dipped below the horizon. Is there something on your mind? Adrian asked softly, taking a seat beside him. William sighed, his hands folding over his lap. I was thinking about Era and what Carla said about moving forward. Adrian's expression softened. You don't have to rush anything. Healing takes time. William smiled faintly, leaning his head back against the chair. I know. It's just, I don't want to be stuck in the past forever. Adrian nodded in understanding. There's no right way to move forward. Just go at your own pace. One afternoon, while William was away at a meeting in town, Adrian decided to explore the woods near the house. The trees were tall, their branches intertwining overhead, creating a canopy of deep green. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and earth. As he wandered deeper into the forest, Adrian stumbled upon a small, charming cottage tucked between the trees. It was old, the wood slightly weathered, but its presence was welcoming. Curious, Adrian stepped inside. The inside of the cottage was surprisingly tidy, with a warm hearth burning in the corner. A cozy sitting area was furnished with soft chairs and a low table adorned with books and candles. On one wall hung a faded painting of a couple holding hands, beneath which were fresh flowers placed reverently. This must be where Era lived, Adrian murmured, his voice reverent. William mentioned that she loved the woods. It makes sense. Carla materialized beside him, her spectral form shimmering softly. This place is special. She used to come here often when the world felt too overwhelming. Adrian took a seat near the hearth, the warmth enveloping him. It feels like a piece of her still lives here. Carla sat across from him, a gentle smile on her ghostly face. Era wouldn't want William to grieve forever. She would have wanted him to find happiness again. When William returned home, he seemed lighter, less burdened by his grief. Adrian watched him carefully, noticing the subtle changes. One evening, after a peaceful dinner, William approached him, a tentative expression on his face. I went back to the cottage today, William admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. It felt right, like Era's presence was there, guiding me. Adrian smiled warmly. That's a good sign. It means you're ready for something more. I don't know if I'm ready for a relationship again, William admitted, his voice hesitant, but I do know that I don't want to live in the past anymore. I want to create new memories with you. Adrian's heart skipped a beat. He reached out, taking William's hand in his. You don't have to rush anything. Just know that I'm here, always. William's eyes softened, a quiet comfort in his gaze. Thank you, Adrian, for everything. Carla watched from the corner of the room, a proud smile lighting up her translucent face. See? He's getting there. Adrian chuckled softly. Yeah, he is. The room fell into a peaceful silence, the weight of grief beginning to lift. For the first time in a long time, William and Adrian felt ready to move forward, hand in hand, into the next chapter of their lives. Weeks passed, and William and Adrian continued to navigate their new relationship, slowly finding balance in each other's presence. Life had quieted at the manor, but the memory of Carla and Era still lingered softly in the background. One evening, after a long day tending to the estate, Adrian was walking through the grand hall when he felt a chill in the air. The atmosphere grew heavier, and the distant sound of laughter echoed through the corridors, though no one was there. Carla? Adrian called softly, looking around. From the shadows of the room emerged Carla, her ghostly figure shimmering in the dim light. Her gentle smile was reassuring, though her presence still unsettled Adrian slightly. Are you trying to scare me again? Adrian teased lightly. Carla chuckled. No need for that. I just came to check on you both. Adrian sighed, leaning against a nearby column. We're doing all right. William's been more open lately. Still, there are moments when I can feel Era's absence. Carla's expression grew thoughtful. She would have wanted you to move forward. It's not betrayal. It's a continuation of her memory. She wouldn't want you to be stuck in the past forever. Adrian nodded slowly. I know. It's just hard sometimes. Carla's smile softened. She's watching over you, and she's proud." As autumn gave way to winter, the village near the manor prepared for the annual festival, an event that brought the community together in celebration. Despite the lingering sadness, William agreed to attend with Adrian, knowing it would help bring more life into their days. The festival grounds were lively, with colorful decorations, food stalls, and music echoing through the air. Children ran through the streets, laughter mingling with the sound of distant drums and flutes. William and Adrian wandered through the crowd, hands intertwined, finding joy in the simple moments. They visited the different stalls, trying seasonal treats and watching performances. Even though the festival wasn't something William had engaged in before, the experience felt warm and comforting beside Adrian. As the evening wore on, they found themselves near a quiet grove where a bonfire had been set up. A musician played a haunting melody on a violin, and the villagers danced around the flames, lost in the rhythm of the night. Adrian looked over at William, a playful glint in his eyes. "Care to dance?" William hesitated, a shy smile forming on his lips. "I might be a terrible dancer." Adrian laughed. "So might I, but let's try." Taking William's hand, they moved into the clearing. The warmth of the fire and the melody of the violin filled the air. It wasn't perfect, but it was genuine, a moment of connection, shared with no ghosts or past regrets. Carla appeared nearby, watching them with a gentle smile. She clapped softly, her presence unnoticed by the surrounding villagers. "See? This is what Era wanted." Adrian felt her presence, but he didn't break stride. She'd be happy to see this. As the night grew deeper, William and Adrian shared whispered words, promises of a future where love would continue to grow, free from the weight of the past. And despite the ghosts that once haunted them, in that moment, they felt truly alive. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the story. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more delightful stories.